Diaguit. We're joined today by Kenji Yoshida. Kenji is a man. He has black hair. But when when was the last time we did this? Like 6 months ago?
Yeah, a couple of
More?
months ago. Yeah.
It's been a pretty eventful year in
Yes.
Japan, hasn't it?
A lot has been going on in Japan. Yeah.
Like to be writing about politics like in Japan at the moment, like it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So I mean, what at the end of last year we had the end of the Ishiba administration, the
Mm,
birth of the Takaichi administration. Komeito left the coalition. Then you had the snap election just
mm,
recently which ended in a landslide victory for the ruling LDP party. So
right.
it's actually fun just to be writing about
Yeah.
politics in Japan at the
Right.
moment.
Right. And you've been writing quite a bit about the election, and you've also went to see the campaign yourself, right?
Yeah, I went to some of the campaigns, and it's nice like over here. It's kind of like an event,
Yeah.
like it's I mean, not like in America, like where the candidates come out to like,
Right.
fireworks and Bon Jovi, like,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's an event over here, almost like a concert,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty interesting election, I think. I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with the results
Hmm.
now, but of course, like you said, the LDP, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, did pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, Acquired a supermajority in the lower house,
Hmm.
and the opposition was there was a new party, I guess, just for the lower house,
Yeah.
the Centrist Reform Alliance, is it? And then they lost quite a bit of
Hmm.
seats. And there were some new parties, right?
Yeah.
It
The Tomorrow Party of Japan, I
yeah,
think they got 11 seats.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but like it's interesting over here. Like the past 2 years, like every election they've had, upper house, lower house, Tokyo gubernatorial election, all these articles always come out after it, and they're like, the influence that social media played, like
yeah,
in the
yeah.
results of this election. And it's like, obviously, like it's
Right,
incredible that there are politicians still out there in Japan who aren't leveraging social media.
right,
They
right,
think that just rolling around like in a van, and
right.
screaming out the window for 2 hours,
Yeah,
like for, a couple of weeks, it
right.
alone is going to do it for them.
Yeah, yeah. I think SNS sort of really changed the election, how the election is run in
Yeah.
Japan, and the landscape itself. And I think it was like it's been a while since SNS has been pretty important part of the election, right, in Japan.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, you get all these like politicians like who talk about it, after they've lost like their
yeah,
seats
yeah,
or they didn't win seats and they're saying, oh well, this party
yeah,
used social media as if they had some unfair advantage.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and it's like that's not the point.
Right, right.
But I think it's a good thing because now you're seeing, I mean, it's very small, but I mean, there is an increase in the number of young people turning out to vote.
Right, right.
But it's also good for these politicians like who are just so entrenched in the old way
Yeah,
of doing
yeah,
things, like
yeah.
where they really don't have to do all that much.
Right.
Like I said, they can just turn up outside various stations,
Mm,
for
mm,
a couple of hours in the morning and just hand out pamphlets. Like, but now with SNS and social media, like they have to be concise.
mm, mm,
They have to be clear on what their message is
mm.
because they're trying to reach
Yeah,
kids and younger voters like
right,
who don't know all that much about politics and they're not
right.
all that clued in. So they can't get away with this kind of long-winded,
Yeah,
vague,
yeah,
wishy-washy sort of,
right.
way of, explaining themselves or their
Yeah.
message or their policies or what they're trying to do. Um, and you have these so like for example you have these programs on YouTube now
Mm,
where you get politicians on the show but they're talking directly to um what do you call it, like talent or
mm.
like younger celebrities
Right, right, right.
like boys and girls essentially like who don't
Mm,
know anything about
yeah,
politics, like, and it's really funny because I mean whatever side of the spectrum they're on, like, it doesn't matter, like, but the ones who try to talk and, reach these kids, like, with their,
mm,
long-winded speeches,
right.
like this and that, like, they just get shot down, like, and it's
Yeah,
like they just burn, like, and
yeah,
it's so, so funny. But I mean, I think that's been a really positive
Mm,
aspect
mm,
of social media on the political landscape here in
yeah.
Japan. Like,
Were there a lot of young people out there when you went to see the campaign?
yeah, there were like there were a lot of, I mean, there were obviously like, older
Yeah,
voters
yeah.
as well, but there were young married couples with kids
Right,
like
right, right.
it was kind of late at night, like, so I mean the kids like would be sleeping,
Yeah.
and the parents would just be like, holding them in their arms
Mm,
like and
mm.
walking back and forth. But yeah, no, it was like a good mix of, different
Right,
ages.
right.
And from what I saw, like in my own experience, um fairly well balanced, gender wise as
Mm,
well.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, I think a lot of younger generation are, like you said, are becoming more interested in politics. Perhaps especially after Takaichi's government
yeah.
launched and her approval rating. Of course, you look at like she had really good high
Mm.
approval rating from especially the younger generation. So I think that's also sort of shifting, I guess, in Japan. I don't think they were not interested. They just didn't really have an opportunity, I guess, to really get engaged and involved in politics, would you say?
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, you can't really blame them because, like I said, going back to my point about,
Right,
the old school way of doing
right,
it,
right.
it's like just the weeks leading up to an election, you get like Japanese politicians like, occasionally turning up to train stations, like with a microphone
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
like just talking for hours on end. But sometimes you don't even get that.
yeah.
It's like it's just a voice recording, and like a poster of the
Right,
candidate. Like,
right.
yeah, it's almost like those things you see on roads over here when they're under construction.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
when it's too late at night for anybody to be working, like
Right.
even here, you just get a placard like of like a construction worker, like with the arm
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
waving like that.
yeah.
That's what it's like. And it's like, it's really good now
Mm,
that,
mm.
like, thanks to social media, like we're moving away from that.
Yeah, yeah. Something you said earlier also interesting was how foreign media has been,
Mm.
they've been writing quite a bit about the election,
Yeah.
and they've been sort of, how would you see, the Western media, for instance, how they report on the election or,
I think, well, when you look back to October last year and a lot of the reporting that was coming out of like major
yeah,
um, Western media outlets, it was kind of it was quite split. Like if there were some media outlets, congratulating Takaichi and her administration, there were a lot that were like, oh, Japan is running, down
yeah,
heading back towards,
right
the
wing, yeah,
1930s, like,
nationalist, yeah.
um, but this time, like, I mean, I don't know if it's the same for you, but
Mm,
I think with the super majority,
mm,
and the overwhelming, support that the administration has received from the
mm.
public, it's, I think it's become, almost impossible for, these outlets in that, in October were,
Yeah, yeah,
sort of like wringing their hands,
yeah,
about like nationalism or whatever. It's impossible, like, or
yeah,
very difficult for them now
yeah,
to, sort of say that, oh, whatever, the fringe right,
yeah.
like in Japan, has,
Right,
has
right,
taken over.
right. Yeah, I mean, I've seen like even before when Takaichi's government, when she was first elected as a prime minister, there were several, very few mainstream
Yeah.
Western media, very few, like you said, and like opinion writers
Mm.
had a pretty good take, I think,
Yeah.
that, it's not like Japan was shifting to the right or
Mm.
that that Japan would now turn to some militarism and
Yeah.
but I think, like you said, this election really did show what the general
Mm.
population were thinking and how and so it's a reflection of what the general population, I guess, was feeling and uh the Western media, I guess, a lot of them sort of uh I don't know, like toned down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, speaking of like younger voters
Mm.
and younger people in Japan, um, like I go to the gym quite a lot, and
Yeah.
every year, when January rolls around, um, like, don't get me wrong, it's nice to have, more people getting interested in fitness and going to the gym.
Yeah.
But for the first few weeks of January, it's every gym is just
Packed.
inundated
Yeah.
with, you know,
Yeah.
people, you know, on their New Year
Yeah.
resolution buzz, like, you know, getting started in that, and it's impossible to, you know,
Yeah.
get anything done. Um, but I've recently just started going to driving school, and you know, I moved home recently, and in spring, like I've just realized now, like, you know, February, March period, like in Japan, you're competing with all these university students, like, and young
Yeah.
people, like,
Yeah.
so like driving school, for example, they said back in November, December, they were like, get all your driving lessons in now because come February or March, springtime, you know, you're not going to be able to get a
Yeah.
reservation. Like, you're not going to be able to book a class. And I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. Like, so true.
Yeah.
And then the same for like moving house as well. Like, you know, you got to try and get one quickly because you got all these university
Yeah.
students like
Yeah.
snapping up like
Yeah.
all the good places.
So you're is this your first time obtaining a driver's license?
Yeah, you know, so I like Ireland is like I'm from Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so small that you really, if you didn't want to get a driver's
Yeah.
license, you could just basically get almost anywhere, like on public transport or a
Oh wow.
bike.
Wow. Yeah.
So like I just never got
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
my driver's license. So I don't really have anything to compare the experience
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
like, you know, driving in Japan versus driving in Ireland. But you know, in Ireland, up until very recently, you could just you didn't have to go to driving school.
Oh
You
wow.
didn't have
Yeah.
to pay all this money
Yeah. Yeah.
like you do over here to have to go to
Yeah.
driving
Yeah.
school for a license. Like your parents, like Sunday mornings, you know, your parents would just show you like in an empty church parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like how we did it. I don't know. Was it ever like that in Korea, South Korea?
Um, it's a bit similar to Japan.
Yeah.
You would go to, I think they call it what, like a cramming school or like
Yeah,
a,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, like a school, but it's much less expensive
yeah. Mm.
and it takes less time. But it's pretty expensive here, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
it's like I was, yeah, yeah, it's very
Yeah,
expensive
I
for
know. I mean,
me.
I mean, I remember, because my mom is Korean and then
Yeah,
she came to Japan and this was a while ago,
right.
like 20 some years ago. It was expensive then too,
Okay.
and you had to take like a month-long course,
Yeah,
and it's time consuming, financial wise, it's
yeah.
pretty big commitment, right? And then you have to take the exam, right? And the exam is pretty tough, I would say.
Yeah, I mean the past like again, I don't know, maybe it's the same in Ireland, but you know,
Yeah.
I mean I have no point of reference, but yeah, it's like on the written exam you have to get like 48 out of 50 for a
Oh wow,
pass.
wow.
Yeah, so it's like one question wrong basically, like, and you're out. Like, so I failed the first time round. I got it
Yeah,
on the
I heard a
second.
lot of people fail the first time because it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you also drive around? Do you drive, like, do you actually test drive or?
No, because again, this is something like I only found out after coming to Japan and
Yeah.
after, you know, enrolling in driving school. But when you have on a provisional license, you need to have somebody in the passenger seat
Okay.
with you driving.
Right,
Like
right.
maybe that's the same in most countries. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
but my like in Ireland, like nobody abides by that rule
yeah,
at all. Like
yeah,
if it's there, you know.
yeah, yeah. So you need someone with a license sitting next to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people like I could ask, like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
to sit in the passenger seat, but you know, I mean, I don't even know how to reverse yet. Like, you know,
Yes.
so I mean, they've be kind of taking their lives into their own hands. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I moved recently as well.
Wow.
Um,
It's moving season, is it, in Japan
yeah, well, I mean,
around
moving
this time
season, I
or?
don't know. Like, I guess, like the timing, like coincides with, you know, university enrollment and
Yeah,
graduation,
yeah,
whatever. Like, and you know, so I mean, going to the real estate agents, you know, I look around me, and you know, everybody there, like, is
yeah.
just some, you know, teenager, with a black mask and big, like, you know, platform shoes. Like, and
Yeah,
they're there with their parents. You know, their
yeah,
parents
yeah,
are like doing everything for them. Like, so yeah, like I was trying to get in there, you know, and like get a decent place, like before all the kids like
yeah,
snap them up. Um, but like moving in Japan, it's so different from it. Like there's good and bad points. Like good in that it's like compared to Ireland or the US, like it's way more regulated.
yeah.
Like in Ireland and the US, like in Ireland's case, like there are so few places to live at the moment.
Oh,
So it's really Wild West in that, it's not really through real estate agents so much as, hey, my friend knows this guy,
Oh,
like,
wow, wow.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
and you don't see any pictures of the place. You
Yeah,
go for a viewing, and it's basically like a horse stable, in every sense of the word. Like,
yeah,
so it's nice to have, like, over here you've got like proper
yeah,
real estate
yeah,
agents, you go in and there's the nice nursery rhyme music playing,
yeah, yeah,
everything. But what really sucks, I don't know, you've moved in Japan as well, so
yeah,
you can probably relate to this, but things like key money,
yeah,
and gift money. So like on top of the rent and utilities and then like handling fees,
yeah,
that you would have to pay anywhere really.
yeah.
Um, you've got to pay like key money,
Key money, yeah,
just to receive the key,
yeah,
and then like thank you money just to say
yeah,
thank you for
yeah,
living
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Like you've obviously experienced that
Yeah,
too, right?
there are some places that ask for
Hmm.
you call it thank you money. Yeah, I guess
Thank
that's the direct
scheme. Yeah,
translation.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And then there's deposit as well.
Yeah,
On
yeah,
top of
okay.
that,
Yeah.
deposit would be separate from the thank you money. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's I've never heard about the thank you money, right? Because
That is what it is,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, pretty much like
It's
for all intents and purposes,
yeah.
like,
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting system. I don't know if other countries have system like that. I know they have like a deposit system,
mm,
um, and you get it back when you leave,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But have you had any sort of challenges finding a place? Because I had, pretty difficulty finding.
Well, what difficulties did you face? Like,
So, well, I'm Japanese,
yeah.
and I have, I have a Japanese citizenship,
Mm,
but I lived in foreign country for many, many years.
right.
So when I returned, I have to find like where my original address was,
Yeah.
and it took weeks to do that.
Right.
You had to go to the city hall, and it's just a daunting process. But I was it like that for you, or is it more smoother for?
Well, it's like anything over here, bureaucracy,
Yeah,
bureaucracy,
yeah,
bureaucracy. Like, I mean, it's
exactly. Yeah,
it's good, you know, in a sense, like, but then it's also, it doesn't make it any easier. Like,
yeah, yeah,
it doesn't make the amount of documentation you need any less. Like, so
yeah,
it's,
yeah,
yeah, but one, like, I've had the experience of moving in the US as well. You've lived in the US too,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, this would never happen in Japan, I know.
yeah,
But in the US, like, you would move into a place, and like depending, sometimes the landlord would just turn up like unannounced,
yeah,
and not even like, that he or she was suspicious,
yeah,
that you
yeah,
were doing something suspect. Like,
yeah,
they would just kind of like turn up, like, and make themselves at home.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's one of the benefits I think over here of,
Wow,
like, very
that would not
thorough
happen in Japan for sure.
bureaucracy.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of bureaucracy. It's good, like you said, on some level, but
Yeah.
sometimes they require just unnecessary documentation,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. Just takes too much time, and I sometimes it's inefficient, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you had any trouble, like as a foreigner finding a place?
Um,
Because I asked because even if when I'm Japanese citizen, there are still owners and landlords who not refuse but reluctant to rent to
yeah.
someone who's lived abroad.
Well, I did actually. There was only one place. Like, I booked a viewing, and then like on the day, like, I got a phone call, from the real estate agent, and they said that the landlord, just didn't want foreigners
Yeah,
like
yeah,
living there, and it's like, okay, I wasn't really, I didn't really mind, I
yeah,
don't mind, but it's like, could you please just say that, like, up front?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
save you and me
exactly. Yeah,
time. Like,
yeah. That's what I heard from. I went to like three different real estate
yeah,
companies. Every one of them said, if you say you lived abroad for many
yeah.
years, they might refuse to rent. So it's better to look for newer houses because the owners tend to be younger.
Okay.
So the older generation people tend to be less sort of open to renting
Yeah,
to foreigners or someone who lived abroad for
they're
years.
down with the gaijin.
Yeah. So yeah, that's still there, I guess. I mean, it's gotten much better, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, as I said, my mother's Korean when she came to Japan many, many years ago, like 20 some years ago, was much worse than,
right.
but yeah, I guess it's still there.
But speaking of Korea, at this time, like usually like every year once cherry blossom season rolls around,
Mm.
like in Korea, like there's like this debate between Japan and Korea about like who owns
Who owns
the
the cherry?
cherry
Yeah,
blossom
yeah,
trees, like.
yeah,
But I don't know, like past few years, that's kind of like sort of subsided a bit.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
mean, you don't get as many people on either side like
That's true.
engaging
That's
with
true.
it. Like,
Yeah, it used to be like a really hot topic.
yeah.
People would debate over this. I mean, I never really thought much of it, you know. But yeah, that's true. I don't think we really see much news report on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But what's it like? Is it there the same or similar kind of culture like of cherry blossom viewing in Korea? Like, I mean, would
yeah,
people roll out like, once full bloom comes around, like and spread out
yeah,
their
yeah.
tarp and like start drinking? Like same thing
Yes,
in
it's
Korea, is it?
yeah. Is it like that in Japan?
But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
are you seriously asking me? Like,
Oh,
you must have seen that. Like,
yeah, yeah. Mostly like during that particular season, yes. I mean,
yeah,
there are areas where it's where you can it's the best place
yeah,
to enjoy the whole cherry blossom season. So yeah, that's I think similar. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, like the amount of people, I don't know if you've ever been to like Wayno Park or
Mm,
somewhere like that. It's like one of the major cherry blossom viewing places, I
yeah.
think. But you get so many people like, and it's so crowded.
Yeah.
Um, it's like it's kind of like when you go to Kyoto, sometimes like it's just so overcrowded that it's impossible to enjoy anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like totally like the opposite of what like cherry blossom viewing should be about. So like I actually prefer the do you know umezakura?
No.
Like they bloom or blossom just
J-
before the
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
sakura, and nobody really cares about them,
Yeah.
like but I mean, to me, like to my eye, I mean they look pretty similar and
Yeah.
just as beautiful, like. So I actually prefer that, like just like when you're randomly walking down the street and
Mm,
you see like an umezakura and you're like, oh wow.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like I would much rather take my cans of Strong Zero and drink,
Yeah.
under a random,
When around is that like
like
say
end of February.
February? Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
wow. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah. But then, and you also get over here like once cherry blossom season comes, like you get all these places like Starbucks in Japan and like all the convenience stores. They put out all these sweets like that are like sakura flavored
Oh yeah.
or cherry blossom flavored.
Have you tried them?
Yeah, I have, and they're good.
Yeah.
Have you? No.
No.
Okay. But it's one of these things for me. It's like Japanese people will tell you that mikan is not like orange,
Yeah.
or yuzu is not like lemon.
Yeah.
I'm like mikan, that's just orange, mate. Like yuzu, that's a lemon, like
Yeah.
whatever way you put it. Sakura flavored stuff, like that's white chocolate.
Oh yeah.
Prove me wrong. Like that's my attitude on it.
Really? Oh wow. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, but there's a completely useless random bit of information to finish up this episode of 20 Minutes With. So I guess we'll probably be back in like another 3 or 6 months to talk
Maybe.
about heavy political stuff and then totally random stuff from our personal lives. So thanks for listening.